Part 1. The Silence of a Nobody. The city of Athelberg did not hum. It respirated. Gleaming white towers pierced a perpetually overcast sky, their lines clean and severe, connected by the silent, frictionless glide of maglev trains. On the pristine plazas below, citizens moved in streams of muted gray, their paths efficient, their faces serene and vacant. This was the Unity, a society of absolute order, achieved at the cost of innovation and emotion. Art, music, passion, these were relics of a chaotic past, quarantined behind the sterile glass of city museums, artifacts to be observed but never felt.
This is TS Simple Serene Stories. Before we get back to this touching story, I have a quick question for you. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe that humanity and miracles are eternal, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Now, let's get back to the story.
Athelberg ran on technology it could no longer create. A vast, complex machine maintained by strict adherence to ancient blueprints its operators no longer truly understood. In this silent world, Elara was a ghost. Her function was sanitation technician, grade 3, which meant she spent her days polishing the surfaces this perfect world walked upon. She was a null, an outcast marked from birth, and therefore functionally invisible. As she wiped down the handrail of a public transit hub, citizens would adjust their paths to avoid her without ever meeting her eyes. Their movements as fluid and unconscious as water flowing around a stone. She lived in the city's underbelly, in a small utilitarian cube where the light was always dim and the air tasted of recycled oxygen. The reason for her status was etched across her back, a sprawling, intricate tattoo that swirled from her shoulder blades to the base of her spine. It was a breathtaking anomaly in a world of uniformity, a pattern that seemed to be equal parts galactic nebula and microcircuitry. She remembered the medical examinations from her childhood, the cold touch of diagnostic tools. She could still see the face of the last doctor who had tried to understand it, his features tight with frustration as he stared at a blank scanner screen. "It's impossible," he had muttered, turning away from the display which showed nothing but her own biological readings. The ink is part of her cellular makeup, yet it has no mass, no foreign material. It's like a shadow that can't be scanned or cut. It was a flaw in the code of creation, and for that, she was designated null. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, the tattoo seemed to have a life of its own. She would feel a phantom sensation, like the whisper of a voice on the very edge of hearing, or catch a fleeting after-image in her vision, a flash of a windswept coastline she had never seen, the scent of rain on dry earth. She dismissed them as tricks of a lonely mind. One afternoon, while cleaning a service corridor, she saw an engineer staring at a flickering power conduit, his face pale. He consulted a holographic blueprint, his knuckles white where he gripped his toolkit. "Another fluctuation, anxious," he complained to a passing colleague, his voice a low, anxious buzz. "I can follow the repair sequence, but I don't know why it's happening." He shook his head, gesturing at the wall. "If one of these old systems truly fails, we won't know how to build a new one." The colleague just nodded, his expression placid, and continued on his way. Elara watched them go, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. The city was a perfect, gleaming machine, but it was running on borrowed time, and no one but the ghosts in the walls seemed to notice. Part 2. The First Whisper. The day of the synchronization ceremony arrived with a palpable stillness. It was the most sacred observance in Athelberg, a citywide ritual where every functional citizen would neurally interface to reaffirm their commitment to the Unity, their minds joining in a silent, synchronous pulse that was said to strengthen the city's core. Elara was supposed to be cleaning the lower-level conduits, far from the proceedings, but a last-minute personnel shortage changed her fate. Her supervisor, a man with a perpetually pinched face, found her in a service corridor. "The regular tech for the Grand Chamber is offline," he said, not bothering to hide his annoyance. "You'll take his place. Just clean the perimeter. Don't touch anything important." He gave her a dismissive glance. "A null can't disrupt the signal anyway. You're practically static." Her insignificance was her key. She was granted access to the one place that was the heart of their society, precisely because they believed she had no heart of her own. Standing in the vast circular chamber, she watched as citizens filed in, their faces placid, and took their places at the ring of sleek, white interface chairs. As the ceremony began, a low, resonant tone filled the air, and a soft blue light emanated from the active ports. Elara moved along the edge of the room with her sanitation kit, a ghost at the feast. She was an outcast, watching the ultimate act of inclusion. A lifetime of being ignored, of being treated as less than human, churned within her. It wasn't defiance that moved her hand, but a desperate, aching curiosity. She needed to know what it felt like. Just for a second. Her fingers brushed against an active, unoccupied interface port. The world shattered. An arc of raw energy, blindingly white, leaped from the port and struck her, but she felt no pain. It was a current of pure information, and it didn't flow through her, it flowed into the tattoo on her back. The lights in the grand chamber flared violently, and the resonant tone warped into a discordant shriek. For Elara, the phantom whispers she had lived with her whole life exploded into a deafening roar of a billion voices crying out at once. The floor rushed up to meet her as she collapsed into darkness. When security guards found her, she was pale and trembling, her eyes wide with a terror that was not entirely her own. She was muttering impossibilities. A single perfect line from a forgotten opera soared from her lips, followed by the complex chemical formula for a neurocompound not yet synthesized. Then her face crumpled, and she let out a gut-wrenching sob, a child's cry for a mother who had turned to dust a century ago. An alarm blared. Far away in his sterile office, Administrator Valerius received the alert. He did not see a sick girl on the floor of his sacred chamber. He saw a systemic error, a virus in the code of his perfect city, and it had to be purged. Part 3. The Chorus Awakens. Elara awoke to the hum of medical monitors and the sterile chill of a detention clinic. She was lying on a hard, white slab, the thin fabric of her uniform doing little to ward off the cold. A faint warm light pulsed from her back, the glow of her tattoo visible through the gray material. The roar in her head had subsided, but it had not vanished. It had changed. The chaotic screaming cacophony was organizing itself, the billion voices aligning like iron filings in a magnetic field, shifting from a mob into a choir. She squeezed her eyes shut, a single desperate thought, her only anchor in the storm. My name is Elara. A flood of memories, not her own, washed over her. The terror of watching a world burn, the fierce love for a child with forgotten eyes, the burning frustration of an unfinished symphony, the quiet satisfaction of solving a complex proof. She felt the weight of a billion lives, a billion last moments. She was drowning. My name is Elara. Then, one voice rose from the symphony, clear and calm as a bell. It did not shout. It resonated within her. And we hear you, Elara. Do not be afraid. The voice belonged to a woman. It was steady, kind. We are the chorus, the minds of the last generation before the unity. When the world fell into the great silence, we were saved in this ark. This living server you carry on your back. The energy from the synchronization interface was the key. It gave us enough power to fully awaken, to bond with our host, with you. Elara's own name, the one she had clung to, suddenly felt impossibly small. The door to the clinic hissed open, and Administrator Valerius entered, flanked by two imposing security guards. His face was a mask of cold authority, his eyes sweeping over Elara with clinical disdain. Report, he clipped. Unstable energy readings, Administrator, a medic said. Centered on the anomaly, her vital signs are erratic. Valerius stepped closer, his gaze fixed on Elara. How did a null, he said, a systemic error, create such a disruption in the Grand Chamber? Elara opened her mouth, but the words that came out were not entirely her own. Her voice was a strange harmony, her own quiet tone layered with the faint, echoing resonance of others. Your security is a protocol, not a practice, she stated, her eyes locking with his. She described a flaw in the guards' patrol routes outside the chamber, a blind spot that occurred every 17 minutes. And your energy grid is cascading toward a critical failure, she added. She cited the exact energy fluctuations from Sector Gamma 7, the same classified report that had appeared on Valerius's private terminal not an hour before. We are connected to the city's network through you, Anya's voice whispered privately in her mind. It is primitive, but the architects and hackers among us are learning its language. Valerius's composure finally cracked. He took an involuntary step back, his face paling. The blood drained from his face. Nobody, possessed knowledge that was impossible. The calm certainty of his world was fracturing before his eyes. He saw not a girl, but the return of the very chaos his ancestors had sacrificed everything to contain. Unpredictability, knowledge without order, power without control. His fear, cold and absolute, solidified into a new, terrible resolve. For the city to survive, for the unity to hold, this anomaly could not be allowed to exist. It had to be erased. Part 4. The Revelation and the Purpose. Left alone in the humming silence of the clinic, Elara felt the chorus draw closer, their presence a weight in the air. Anya's voice returned, stripped of its scientific calm, now imbued with the solemnity of a final confession. The history they teach you is a lie, Elara. The unity was not a philosophy chosen for peace. It was a cage built around a catastrophe. The story flooded into her mind, not as words, but as a torrent of shared memory. She saw it. A fire in the heavens, a sun swelling with malevolent energy. The Great Silence wasn't a societal collapse. It was a desperate, last-ditch defense. The Ark Project was meant to be a temporary haven, a digital ghost ship to carry humanity's consciousness through the storm. But the architects of the Unity seized power in the chaos, Anya explained, her voice laced with an ancient sorrow. They saw our messy, vibrant, emotional world as the true disease. They chose the sterile peace of the cage over the dangerous freedom of the soul, and they rewrote history to make everyone forget there was ever a choice. Then came the final, devastating truth. The solar flare was cyclical. Our calculations were clear, even then. And it is coming back. The city's shields, untouched by innovation for a century, have a structural integrity of less than 17%. They will not hold. Aethelberg will be scoured from the face of the planet. The words broke her. The weight of 1 billion souls was one thing. The weight of their extinction, and hers, was another. A raw, animal sound tore from her throat. She scrambled off the slab and pressed herself into the corner of the room, curling into a tight ball, her hands clamped over her ears, as if she could physically block out the truth. "No!" she sobbed, her voice raw and ragged. "No, I can't! Leave me alone! I'm a nobody! I'm just a nobody!" She wanted to run, to hide, to shrink back into the blissful ignorance of being invisible. She was a cleaner, a ghost, not a savior, not an ark. The chorus did not command her. It did not demand she be strong. Instead, it reached for her. Anya's voice was the first to touch her, soft as a blanket. "We are afraid too, Elara." Then, a new feeling, pure and overwhelming, washed through her. Not a thought, but a sensation. It was the fierce, unconditional love of a father holding his newborn child for the first time. It was warm and protective and utterly selfless. Tears streamed down Elara's face, no longer from terror, but from the sheer, heartbreaking beauty of the feeling. An artist from the chorus then filled her mind's eye with a memory, a breathtaking sunset over a turquoise ocean, the sky painted in hues of orange and violet she had never known existed. They were not using her, they were sharing with her. Their fear, their love, their last beautiful moments. They were showing her everything they were fighting to save. Slowly, her sobs subsided. The rigid terror in her limbs began to soften. She was still afraid, but the crushing weight of her solitude was gone. She was one person, but she was not alone. She slowly uncurled, pushing herself into a sitting position, her back against the cold wall. Her breath was shaky, but her eyes were clear. "Okay," she whispered into the silent room, her voice barely audible, but the chorus heard. "What do we do?" Part 5. The Voice of a Billion. The door to the clinic hissed open. 2 guards entered, their faces impassive. They flanked a medic pushing a chrome cart upon which rested a neural sanitizer, a device of polished metal and cool-looking electrodes designed to wipe a mind clean, leaving behind a placid, empty shell. This was the fate of anomalies. This was the mercy of the unity. But the girl cowering in the corner was gone. In her place, Elara stood, her posture straight, her eyes clear and blazing with a light that was not entirely her own. She faced them not as a null, but as a nexus. "Proceed with the sanitization," the lead guard ordered, his voice flat. Elara opened her mouth. The sound that emerged was not a scream or a word, but a force of nature. It was a harmonic wave, a billion voices singing a single, complex chord that vibrated in the very bones of the guards. It was the sound of a civilization refusing to die. From within the impossible chorus, individual voices rose to the surface, sharp and clear. A scientist's calm, cutting tenor. "Listen to the data." A soldier's sharp, authoritative bark. "Stand down! Now!" A mother's fierce protective roar that shook the room. "You will not erase us again!" The sonic pressure was immense. A network of hairline cracks spread across the sterile white walls. The chrome cart rattled violently, and the neural sanitizer sparked and died. The medic cried out, stumbling back, his hands clapped over his ears. The guards were frozen, their faces slack with shock and terror, their training utterly useless against an enemy that fought with memory and sound. "Now, Elara, move." The chorus guided her. She walked past the stunned guards, her touch on the door panel not just opening it, but overriding the entire sector's security lockdown. Alarms fell silent. Red lights turned green. She didn't run. She strode through the corridors with the purpose of a billion minds. Reaching a central communications hub, she placed her palm on the main console. Instantly, Ethelberg's placid information streams were hijacked. On every public screen and every private terminal, the serene face of Administrator Valerius was replaced. Images of a forgotten, vibrant past flashed across the city. Images of art, of laughter, of chaos, and love. Then came the data. The schematics of the failing shields laid bare for all to see the terrifying, undeniable trajectory of the incoming solar flare. Her destination was the engineering hub, the city's technological heart. She entered to find the chief engineer, a stern-faced woman named Lyra, staring at a screen displaying Elara's broadcast, her face a mask of conflict. Protocol warred with the terrifying proof before her. "This is impossible," Lyra whispered as Elara approached. "No," Elara said, her voice now a calm, steady conduit for the minds within. "It's just forgotten." Guided by a dozen of the Ark's greatest engineers, she didn't give answers. She asked questions. "Look at the original shield schematics, Section 7 Gamma. Cross-reference it with the principles of harmonic resonance your textbook submitted. What do you see?" Lyra's eyes, followed by those of her staff, flew across the holographic displays. A flicker of understanding, then another. They were not being told. They were being guided to rediscover the knowledge themselves. It was their science, their heritage, the energy matrix. Lyra breathed, her eyes wide with dawning comprehension. It's not a static barrier, it's meant to be tuned, like an instrument. At that moment, Valerius's face appeared on the main screen, his voice booming with cold fury. "Engineer Lyra, arrest that anomaly. Return to your posts. Maintain the unity." Lyra looked from the furious face of her leader to the quiet, luminous face of the nobody, and then to the truth laid bare in the equations before her. She took a deep breath, the first breath of a free woman. "Shut him off," she commanded her team, "and get to work. We have a city to save." Part 6. A New Dawn. The sky burned. The solar flare, a wave of incandescent fury, washed over Ethelberg, and the newly tuned shields held. They shimmered with the light of forgotten science, a testament to a past rediscovered and a future narrowly reclaimed. The city was saved, but the silence that followed was not the placid quiet of the unity. It was the stunned, uncertain silence of a world broken open. The aftermath was no simple victory parade. Administrator Valerius was detained, but his loyalists protested in the plazas, clinging to the familiar safety of their old order. The city was fractured. Some citizens now looked at Elara with a dawning awe, leaving small, handmade trinkets at the door to her new quarters. A flower woven from colored wire, a carving of a strange bird, the first new art in a century. Others shrank away as she passed, whispering, "Abomination," their fear of the unknown greater than their gratitude. The story ends with Elara on a high balcony, overlooking a city grappling with its newfound painful freedom. The tattoo on her back, once a mark of shame, now glowed with a soft internal light. She felt the immense, comforting connection to the billion souls within her, but also a profound new isolation, set apart from humanity, forever. The quiet persistence of hope had saved them, but the struggle to overcome the adversity of their own nature had only just begun.
Thank you for taking a quiet moment with us. Every story is a journey, and we're so glad you joined us for this one.
We believe stories are a way to connect, even when we're apart. If you felt a connection to this tale, we invite you to subscribe and become part of our growing circle.
Our question for you today is, what's a simple moment of peace you've experienced this week?
Share it in the comments. Let's fill this space with serene moments.
Until the next story, be well.